Hi everyone, my name is Jacob. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to run through using my FAB concept, our upcoming project, Lentor Gardens. If you're not sure of what concept I'm talking about, this is a concept that I have created to understand how the Singapore property market moves based on futures buyers affordability, based on the available supply and demand in the market, as well as based on our buyers' behavior. So to me, every property actually moves the same way. It always have to do with consumer behavior. But of course, there are a lot of factors that's going to affect the property itself. We're going to discuss more about Lentor Gardens today. I'm going to put it through my concept, my FAB concept, and showcase to us whether it is a certified FAB, so like a FAB, or whether to me it's flawed. Because not every project in the market can be bought. But if we can understand the general demographics of whether this project is suitable for most buyers out there, or whether in the future buyers may even want it or not, then we will know whether this is a project that you could consider to buy as an own stay or even as an investment. I won't sugarcoat things, but we'll run through stuff that is going to be aligned with this FAB concept. If you're not sure or you want to know about the FAB concept in general, I'm going to link it to my other video. You will see it maybe up here. I haven't decided where to put it yet. Once I link it up together, you can actually watch the whole concept video and then you understand this is what FAB is like and how can I implement it to any other project, be it whether it's a brand new project or a resale project in the market. Lentor Gardens, is it FAB or flawed? Let's take a look. Before we do anything, if you have any questions or you want to know a little bit more about my thought process or certain projects, whether it's suitable buy or not, you can always scan this QR code, get in touch with me or anybody in my team, and then we are happy to share with you a little bit more. FAB. Just a quick recap. FAB is futures buyer affordability, available supply and demand, as well as buyers' behavior. So how does Lentor Gardens fall into these three key concepts? Let's take a look. Under future buyer affordability, we just want to understand that if you're going to buy a project in Lentor, let's take a quick zoom in. A lot of the data I took from SingStats and all that, but we can take a look. Lentor Gardens is around here. As it's around there, you'll notice that we are surrounded by a few clusters of what we call geographic distribution. So a few clusters of housing in Singapore. We have Condo, Seletar, Sengkang, Hougang, Serangoon, Ang Mo Kio. We have to understand, before we do anything, each different cluster will provide to us a little bit different demographic, be it whether it's the buyer's income, the type of housing they already currently stay in. So if I tell you Seletar, for more experienced agents may think, oh, Seletar has a lot of landed properties. Can we use that to beef out whether our project is a FAB or a flawed project? We have to see it from there. I'm going to go into a lot of statistical data. You can see my thought process on how I analyze property. So you take a look, we're going to take a look at resident population. Based on our total population here, in my 8 different clusters, total I have 1.2 million residents staying within this area. That means, theoretically speaking, if you buy any condo, you want to make sure that around you there is enough people to eventually want your property. This is what we call future demand. Let's say you stay in Pulau Ubin. How many people are in Pulau Ubin, and whether Pulau Ubin will be a good investment or not. So we are going to use this very simple concept, but we're going to dial it up a little bit bigger. So you take a look at my total population here, 1.205 million, the surrounding people that stay around us from Lentor Gardens here. And then you see my AIR here, 25 to 59 years old. AIR stands for what? It stands for active income range. What does that mean? Would we reasonably foresee that a 70-year-old will actively want to buy a house? Unlikely. So we want to say that people who likely will want to buy property is usually within the age of 25 to 59. Either they want to buy their first house, they want to upgrade, or in fact they want to right size. These are what we call active income range because they can usually still loan and they still have disposable income to buy a house without feeling too stressed. So in our total AIR population, we have 366,000 plus 246,000. I actually split it up like something like that. Okay, so bottom, we got 240,000. Top, we got 366,000. Total population being 612,000. I'll show you a little bit more statistics along the way. If we take a look based on SingStat data, this as of 2025, total population 698,000 within Sengkang and Punggol alone. And then within our active income range, we got 25 to 59. I kind of already took the liberty to break it down. In total, we got 366,000. So why is this important? Because if let's say I always use an example like Toa Payoh. If Toa Payoh has a little bit more people that are in the older age range, will you foresee them as possible upgraders a bit lesser? Correct? You will have to look at a slightly niche type of demographic if you are looking at places like Toa Payoh. So when we look at Hougang, Sengkang, Punggol, you realize that we have a lot more younger profiles that are potential upgraders. Of course, we don't count the people who are 0 years old until 25 years old because they may be still studying, kids, or of course not old enough to buy property. We then look at a slightly more mature estate like Serangoon, Ang Mo Kio, and Yishun, parts of it at least. Then you'll notice that actually my population is slightly lesser at 506,000. I also included Mandai, and majority are private properties, landed properties. So if we look at my 4 next clusters here, then you have 506,000, of which your active income range becomes 246,000. So if you look at the summary of the data here, total active income range people, 266,000 plus 246,000 equals 612,000. It is about half my population. So what is the likelihood of these people wanting to buy a private condo? Would you consider them to be high or low? Because I'm not going to say that all 600,000 people would definitely buy, because we have to look at income range, we have to look at demographics, stage of life, all this we want to understand. But would you not say that if this number was higher, then there is a higher likelihood that whatever you own would have stronger demand? So I combine a lot of this data together, and I want us to take a quick look at this. If you want, you can pause the video to really take a zoom in on all these kind of infographics. Otherwise, you can always scan my QR code and reach out to me, then we can talk a little bit more. But if you take a look at this now, total population 1.2 million, active income range 612,000. But what really is a key factor here is the type of people out of my 612,000 that stays in a 4-room HDB, 5-room HDB, condo, or even a landed property. Out of this amount of people, I have 512,000 that stays in this property. So why am I showing you this data? It's because if you look at these people staying here, is there a likelihood of these people wanting to upgrade, right size, or even potentially buy for retirement? Definitely there will be somebody like that, or even it's a second property they may buy for investment. And if I have more people here that earns a decent income, strong, maybe $15,500 a month, or even higher than that, or they are dual income, no kids, and mix of demographics if you watch my concept video again, then you will understand that the higher this number is, the easier it is for me to buy whatever product I want to buy today, and eventually to be able to go and sell it at a profit. So how can we break this down? We take a quick look here. So residents aged 25 to 59 living in 4-room, 5-room condo or landed combined together. You'll notice that close to 40% of the residents staying in this entire data set A to G is my 8 different clusters. So you look at it, 40% stay in a 4-room HDB. Of course, not everybody is going to upgrade, so natural thought process but another close to 30% stay in 5-room executive, followed by close to 20% in condominiums or other apartment types, and a much smaller number of 6.9% who stay in landed properties. But this number is still quite significant, because you will then see that this number of people will be the ones that either help their children buy a house, or they buy a second house for investment, or in fact, they could even possibly buy it as a retirement home. So these buyers are the buyers that maybe don't have so much budget constraint, so they are a bit more open to buy. But these buyers, you will also notice that they may lean towards a slightly older profile group, which means that if they are in an older profile group, it is more likely they'll buy smaller unit types like 2 bedrooms, 1 bedrooms for retirement. Or if they are right sizing, then they will totally sell off their landed property. Then after that, they will go and buy a 4-bedroom or 5-bedroom. And these are usually the people that you aim to sell to, if let's say you are owner of a 4 or 5-bedroom in the Lentor Garden region. So I would say that the key takeaways that I want us to understand here is the type of population that owns a respective type of property, because then you will know that if let's say I show you that the 5-room and the condominium profile is very little, or even the 4-room profile is very little, or if for some reason there's a lot of 3-bedroom owners, then would you foresee that this area will be very strong in the resale market if you were to own a condo? I would say definitely a little bit not so strong. I'll break down the data even further moving on. But if I take 512,000 of the people living in these type of properties, 4-room, 5-room, condo landed, based on my active income range, 512,000 people, and I simply do a 1% of that amount of people, that will equal to 5,120 potential people on a year-on-year basis that potentially want to upgrade. These are also excluding people from external areas, like maybe if they're a little bit further or somewhere else, like maybe they also want to consider upgrading. But if I can say that on a year-on-year basis, there would be people that is potentially looking to upgrade. We also need to then identify what kind of price range they're looking at. So on the assumption that if I always use this number, 15.5k, 30 to 35 years old, if they're aiming to buy 2.38 million by 2030, that means today now they still stay HDB, or they still stay in a 5-room, or they stay in an older condo, they are in 2030 aiming to buy a 2.38 million property. Can they do it or not? Especially if they are coming from this entire area. So based on the FAB framework, we just need to understand very simply, if these people, they are dual income, no kids, they're dual income with kids or elderly couples, if you want to buy a condo today, you must be able to sell to people like them in the future, because they are the ones that will very likely be your buyer pool. So if we look at that 1% of potential buyers and we look at their young future buyer affordability, I think I showed this before, but based on their chart of potential income, be in their respective age group, and assuming I take 7 to 8k per person, technically speaking, based on how much they earn, 7,500 and 8,000 over here, they will have a CPF payout of 1.7k and 1.8k. And then over here, their max loan will be based on 1.785 million, which means that their max purchase price is 2.38 million. Anybody in this kind of age group, you just need to ask yourself, from your own friends or from your own peers, do you know any of your peers or friends that are living in these areas that are earning this type of income? Because if you know that there are people like that in this area, then it is actually much easier for you to be able to sell to people like that next time. Why is that so? It's because if you look at my combined income of 15.5k and my requirement of 2.3 million purchase, I only need 595k down payment. So if I only need 595k down payment, my monthly installment would then be 5,900, of which my CPF payout can pay me out 3,500, my cash difference is 2,400. If I look at it this way, a requirement of 595,000 is required for down payment to buy a $2.38 million purchase. In Punggol, like North Shore area, slightly younger estates, parts of Sengkang that is closer to the MRT station, you'll realize that their 4 rooms sell for about 750,000 and their 5 rooms sell for 880,000. With about 40% and 30% respectively of people staying in 4 rooms and 5 rooms in my clusters there, and if they're able to sell at this kind of price point, 750 and 880, then you'll realize that if they want to buy a $2.38 million purchase, it means this is their second home. They sell their HDB to buy a $2.38 million purchase. At the end of the day, after selling and doing all the relevant fees, etc., for them to upgrade to a $2.38 million purchase, to get this 595,000 is much easier than you think. Because, assuming they bought at 300k last time, etc., after they sell, they will only need to top up 43,000 to buy 2.38 million if this was a dual income no kid profile. If they own a 5-room today, dual income no kid profile, they sell at 80k. In fact, they would even have extra surplus money by the time they choose to sell their 5-room flat to buy into a condo. Whether it's a resale or a brand new launch, to me it doesn't really matter. Because if you were a buyer that buy into Lentor Gardens today, and you can enter it at 1.8, 1.9, even 2 million, for you to exit at 2.3 in 4 to 5 years time is actually very fair. Because why? The buyers in the future can definitely afford it. But if I change these numbers and end up the buyers in this 4-room flat area are only selling at 500k, then of course it's very hard for you to sell at 2.38 million because the consumer behavior will literally make it hard to do. If I change things up a bit and I say that for dual income no kids, they are willing to spend 2.38 million, but like what I mentioned in my FAB concept, if they have kids, it's unlikely that they'll spend so much. Maybe they'll lower their budget. And if to do a $2 million budget, down payment required is only 500,000. But if they sell the HDB at the same price point as I mentioned previously, in fact, even for a 4-room owner, you will have 52k surplus. And for a 5-room owner, you have up to 116k surplus. So this would mean that buyers who are in this area, that means if you own a Lentor Gardens and you can enter even a 3 at 1.8 million, eventually if you want to sell at 2 million, is it possible? Definitely possible. Of course, you can even sell at 2.1 million because it will not move the needle much for this. So what I'm saying is that for Lentor Gardens itself, is a very strong F portion here. The future buyer affordability becomes very strong because the surrounding HDBs, the amount of volume there is around there, as well as the age of the people around there that are in active income range, is very strong. Because it's so strong, I wouldn't say that it's simply like a supply and demand problem. We just need to understand that if my demand from the surrounding estates already have people that are earning a decent income and have people that can sell their HDB at a certain price, it makes it much easier for them to upgrade into Lentor Gardens. If let's say you were a first owner selling to the future second owner, then you can actually demand a certain price because these buyers can afford it, right? But of course, we have to compare other macro factors like the other condos in the vicinity, which I'll touch on a bit later. So now we talk about available supply and demand. This is the part that I think is very important because Lentor number one problem is what? Number one problem is people always say oversupply. If people always say oversupply, let's come and determine what do you mean by oversupply and whether this oversupply can actually be overcome. Let's take a quick look. As I mentioned in my FAB concept, under the available supply and demand portion, we take a look at two things. One at our private property, second at our HDB property. Again, if you are not sure of what I'm talking about, you can watch the video and you can come back to this. Otherwise, you can just watch through this video as well. So we want to look at the supply of HDB in the vicinity, age of HDB in the vicinity, as well as prices of HDB in the vicinity. Again, another set of infographics. I won't run through it too much because I think it's a little bit boring, but you take a look at this. Supply, age, and price. I didn't write the price but if you were to look at even Property Guru, you go and look for 4 and 5 bedrooms, you realize roughly that they can cost between 700 to 900k, depending on 4 or 5 bedrooms that you're looking for. But if you want to simply look at Punggol itself, 204,000 population, residents aged between 25 to 59, 111,000. But you see that 40% comes from 4-room flat, 31% comes from 5-room flats, condos and etc. The rest are a little bit lesser. So you'll notice that maybe my condo upgrader or my second property owner will be a bit lesser from Punggol area, but more upgraders in general from the 4 rooms and 5 rooms. If you take a look at my next data set here, Sengkang, 267,000 population, we have roughly about 30% more, 142,000 compared to 111,000 of homeowners in the Sengkang area itself, but slightly higher 4-room flat ownership, slightly higher 5-room flat ownership, and very similar condominium ownership as well. Next, what we can look at is this Hougang. You realize that Hougang is a slightly more mature township. So you realize, actually what drops? 4-room ownership drops. 5 rooms ownership drops. And on top of that, this 4-room and 5-room, they are actually also much older. So again, you're going to take a look on Property Guru, you realize, they are much older simply because of what? Because it is a more mature township. So most of my young upgraders would likely come from my Sengkang as well as Punggol area, and maybe a bit lesser from Hougang. Hougang, maybe you have 2nd generation, 3rd generation that may buy. You realize that there are more landed properties in Hougang, 9,000 versus 850 and 150 here. So these two combined is 1,000. Punggol and Sengkang combined is 1,000. But over here, you have close to 10 times the amount at 9,006. So what we're looking at here is that would you then expect a lot more buyers from this landed properties to be upgraders? So maybe a bigger unit type purchaser, or even parents that may assist their children to buy houses. They may actually come a lot more from landed properties. So if you take a look at my next portion, Serangoon and Ang Mo Kio, first thought I want you to have is Serangoon and Ang Mo Kio, is it a more mature township or a less mature township? It's definitely more mature. So population-wise, it stands about the same, 116,000, and then subsequently 158,000. But you take a look here, you immediately see 4-room and 5-room ownership also covered at 30%, 20%. Then you realize that condominiums, a little bit more, landed properties a lot more within the Serangoon area because of Serangoon Gardens, Kovan, etc. So if you look at this area, you'll notice that the buyers from these pool here, the active income range are actually halved. What I mean by that, if you take an immediate look back, 111,000, 142,000, 112,000 active income range. But if you look at Serangoon, becomes 53,000 active income range. This is immediately a thought for a lot of us as homeowners. It is that it is a more mature township. Mature township also usually mean one thing. If you look at the number of people who stay in condominiums here, do you anticipate these condominiums to be older or younger? And to be very honest, a lot of the Serangoon condominiums are much older. Apart from a few Affinity Serangoon and Garden Residences, the rest actually tend to be a lot older, hence a smaller population here. Now the question I'll ask you is this: in Serangoon area, if these people want to buy condominium, where can they go to? Either they move closer to town, which could be more expensive, or they move to a younger township, which if you ask yourself, are there young condominiums in this entire area or within this entire vicinity? I don't have much. So will a lot of these buyers eventually come to Lentor? It is actually very likely. Then you look at the next data set, Ang Mo Kio. Ang Mo Kio itself is 73,000 in active income range, but you take a look at my 4-room flat, 43% people will stay there, 24%, 13% and 12%. So you realize that in this older property profile, these people who stay in this 4-room or 5-room, of course they may be staying in family or whatnot, but because of the age of their HDBs here, would you anticipate them to be easy upgraders? I would say a little bit more challenging. So naturally speaking, we have to then look at the type of product we want to buy. Assuming you want to buy Lentor Gardens, have to be priced well. Because if they're priced well in the entry, next time when you want to sell the time, would there be people that coming from Ang Mo Kio want to buy a young condominium, and again, there isn't much on the market, right? Definitely also will have. So you see how I actually broke it down. Why Serangoon and Ang Mo Kio is separated from my Punggol, Sengkang and Hougang? It's because Punggol, Sengkang and Hougang consists of a much younger pool of buyers, whereas Serangoon and Ang Mo Kio consists of a much older pool of buyers. But eventually, if we look at the entire map, which I'll show you again later, just take it as a circle. If my Lentor Garden is in the middle, on the left of it, Hougang, Punggol, Sengkang is on the top right of it. Naturally, you want to be in the middle. Because if you are in the middle, it means that your buyers will actively be put in towards you, right? So it is okay to be in this kind of area. But if let's say I change the thought process and we say the Lentor Gardens was at the edge of Punggol, then you will realize that, hey, actually, that means my only buyer pools will only come from Punggol itself, Sengkang itself, maybe Hougang. But not a lot of these buyer pools will actually come from Serangoon and Ang Mo Kio, right? So naturally, you want to own a property that is within a very central location, which Lentor Gardens actually gives to you quite well. So if I compare my last set, then you'll notice it's going to be Yishun and Mandai, up north a little bit more. You realize that, first of all, my population itself, 228,000, pretty decent. Then you realize that my active income range people is actually 104,000. Even though my population size is double, or a combine of Punggol and Sengkang, but my active income range is actually halved. So this means what? This means that Yishun itself has a much older profile. So can you bank on Yishun to have a lot of people upgrading? I would say not really. But Yishun, do they have a lot of young condominiums there? I can tell you honestly, you go and open a map and find very little. So naturally speaking, if you are a buyer looking to upgrade, where can you go to? When you say that, oh, I don't want to buy Lentor because it's oversupplied, you have to really give a serious thought. It's oversupplied because today you feel it's oversupplied, but when you look at it in the long run, 2030, 2035, these people who want to upgrade or right size or do anything to increase their net worth or asset or portfolio, they only have so few places to go to, which later we'll run through a real life case study. Okay, Mandai, after I realized maybe you don't need to put because why Mandai, you take a look, no HDB. We only have landed properties 390, and then some apartments and condominiums which are a little bit smaller types. But to be very honest, we also later need to understand in the Lentor area what's going to be redeveloped there, such as Tagore MRT station, which I'll touch on later. If you look at supply and demand under HDB property, supply of HDB in the vicinity, we can only look at where? We can only look at Condo, we can look at Sengkang, we can possibly look at Hougang, but it's a bit older. Age of HDB property, again, Punggol, Sengkang, Hougang is decent. Serangoon, a little bit lesser. Ang Mo Kio, of course, a little bit lesser as well. We still do have, but a bit lesser. And then Yishun, you have HDB that is young. However, we can say that the HDB there are not very pricey, which means that the affordability will be a little bit weaker along the way. And prices in HDB vicinity, of course, Punggol, Sengkang, Hougang. So you start to see a trend where most of the buyers actually come from would be from these areas because it's easier to upgrade from these areas. If I was to take a look, one of the small case study that actually PropNext did, which is in the Lentor township, if you look down towards my south side, which is the Ang Mo Kio area, then you realize that Ang Mo Kio itself are coming in with about 5,125 units. That's why if you remember, I talked about 1%. 1% of the entire population there being itself about 5,120 units. So naturally, in Ang Mo Kio itself, there already is potential of 5,125 units that is coming into the resale market in time to come. But I will definitely say that not everybody will buy. So maybe we take a small percentage, 3%, 2% of this township, you still have enough buyers. But I just want everyone to also understand, when it comes to selling, you can say over in the Lentor, I got 5,000 units. However, are everyone going to sell at the same time? Definitely not, because everybody have a slightly different life plan. So if you are an investor, you want to buy in, then aim for a bigger unit type. Aim for a 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom, whereby in 2030 or to 2035, when you want to exit the time, it is easier for a buyer that needs a home immediately to then buy from you. And that's where you can demand that premium. If you are an own stay buyer, you must also understand, if you say that, oh, never mind, I'll wait until TOP first, then I go and buy, then eventually will it be expensive or not? It definitely will be as well, because you are paying for somebody else's time. If we look at it in terms of future supply, as I mentioned just now, let's understand something. Lentor Garden is here, the one in the black square here. If you look at this entire piece of land above Tagore, this entire space is all zone residential. My understanding from here, don't quote me, my understanding from here is 30% private, 70% HDB. What we want to see here is that has redevelopment really started here? And if you notice this line over here, this is my Lentor MRT station. I follow up, you see this dotted line over here? I want to show you a Google Map view. This is the Google Map view. You notice this thing here? You notice this entire thing? This entire thing here is actually my Tagore MRT station. Tagore MRT station actually is already up. But just like how government always plans ahead, it's already there, infrastructure is already done, but hasn't started. So if haven't started means what? It means that is it time to come that this entire area will be redeveloped? Definitely the answer is yes. So if you want to enter into Lentor and it's a fully privatized township, that means this entire space here is only for private residential properties with no HDB, with no ECs, anything, you are going to be one of the only supply in that area that's fully privatized that has amenities, compared to Tagore, which will take some time, but at the same time, quite quick for it to be entirely redeveloped. If now we look at the next thing, just now whatever I showed you was HDB supply. If your HDB supply from Punggol, Sengkang, all that is already pretty decent, and on top of that, I have a future Tagore coming up, would you anticipate these HDBs to be expensive or cheap? And if it's going to be a little bit more expensive, do you anticipate these sellers to then sell and buy your house if you were to own Lentor Garden, or in fact any of the other Lentor projects there? If the answer to that is yes, then you must also know, then how do I enter and when do I enter? Of which that you should just scan a QR code, reach out to me, then we can go and take a look together. But if we look at private properties under the supply and demand factor, I show you a live case study now, which means I never prepared this in advance. I show you right now. I just want to take a look at a few factors. One, age of private property and the neighbors that are younger than 10 years old by 2030 to 2035, number of units in the project, as well as the price gap between some of the projects that are 15 years old versus 1 year old. I'm just going to pull up one of my own apps here. Let's take a look here. If we enter into our filter based on that few clusters of location that I want to look at, and I choose its district. Let's select district 19, which is my Serangoon, Hougang, Punggol. We can also select Bishan, Ang Mo Kio. That means it will overlap a bit to Ang Mo Kio. We can also select Thomson, Springleaf, Yishun, Sembawang, and Seletar. Effectively 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 full districts, which is a really big stretch already. And my number one concern is age of property. So if I'm going to look at it today, 2026, if I want a condo that's less than 10 years old, I must look at 2015 or 2016. But let's say by 2030, I want to know how many condos in that area is less than 10 or 15 years old, which means that maybe I will put it up in terms of age to be 2020, TOP year 2020. And again, number of units is very important, so do a minimum units of 200. Just these two factors alone. We don't consider freehold, leasehold, whatever. We just say that if I want to look at a condo that is within 2020 TOP, and number of units more than 200 units. I just do a search. Done. So you take a look at my left side over here. Under this green bar, you see there's 31 projects, of which 5 are new projects. Again, I forgot to remove this. Now I remove the new projects. There is only 27 resale projects, of which there are 1,672 listings in these 27 areas. But you look at the highlighted map, you see that we cover Serangoon, we cover Ang Mo Kio, we cover Punggol, we even cover Sembawang. If you look at this area, I just want to ask you, if you were a buyer, and that's how I show you the population here is 1.2 million. And in this map in particular, we have already extended to Bishan and Sembawang. So in this map, the population will be even larger. Based on just assuming 1.2 million, if I only got 27 projects that is younger than 10 or 15 years old as of what I have today, don't you feel that, in a sense, it's actually very challenging to buy a young property? So when we are looking at a cluster like this, we also have to understand that as a consumer behavior, if you stay in Yishun, you stay in Punggol, you stay in Ang Mo Kio and say that, I want to buy a young condo, then you will look at any of these that I'm showing inside here. You'll probably look at Amo, you look at J-Scape, Park Greenwich, all this. You look at all this, then you will have your own thought process, you have your own budget, etc. Of course, if you are not willing to spend too much on a condominium, then maybe you'll go towards the Punggol area whereby it's a little bit more affordable. If you want a little bit more premium, you'll go for Amo, J-Scape, but they are really premium. If you want something in between, actually where can you go to? You would naturally, as a buyer in 2030 or 2035, go towards the Lentor area. Why? It's because you have enough condominiums there that you actually have choice. On top of that, you also will have what? You will have the ability to buy a condo there based on how much these people bought last time. That means what? The land price that they entered into, the unit price that they entered into. Then you will be able to find some good deals there. More importantly, if I was to show you the FAB question that I ask all my buyers out there, which is, if your kids come to you and they are, let's say, in their 30s, and they say that, hey, daddy, mommy, I want to buy a house, but the house is a 30 or 35-year-old HDB, your first thought process to tell your kids is, hey, maybe we reconsider first. Because you yourself will be worried that this HDB don't actually present any value down the line. But if you look at a condo in the same thought process, if you buy a 15-year-old condo even today, in 5 to 10 years time when you want to sell is 25 years old, can you reasonably foresee that it will gain enough money or gain enough value for you to want to sell for a profit? This is actually the challenge that a lot of consumers have, because they see it big and all that, but then they don't realize that 10, 15 years later, they will actually have a challenging time selling or making money from the property, because you actually have so much younger properties in the vicinity that's going to compete with you. Back to my entire framework, in my 27 units, I only have 27 units available that's less than 15 or 20 years old by 2030 or 2035. Even if I add another 10 units here, is it a good thing or not? It actually is really good, because if you add another 10 more projects into here, it becomes total of 37. So if it becomes 37, which means that even though there's a lot of supply in the area now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will lose out next time. In fact, it actually gives you a very strong advantage, especially if you're playing with harmonization, as well as you can enter at a more than fair price, like maybe 1.9, 2 million, something like that. I think it's very easy for you to exit next time, because you then have a young property that has the youngest lease there, that has a lot of amenities like MRT station, the 6 minutes walk to MRT, a small mall nearby. You have all these kind of factors, and on top of that, you have future growth from future growth from another HDB estate next time. To me, these kind of factors definitely play a big part into why this Lentor Gardens at present for my F and my A actually makes a lot of perfect sense. So if I then move on to a quick summary, I just want us to understand, if I was to look at the youngest private clusters, you honestly may only have Lentor area. Maybe if I'm wrong, you can write in the comments, where else has a young cluster? That the entire cluster itself is less than 10, 15 years old. Honestly speaking, you may have 1 or 2 condos as individuals, and they themselves will probably have a standalone price that is premium. But if you're looking for a more massive cluster, a little bit harder to come by. So once again, if you like what I've been sharing and all that, and you have a bit more questions, or if you want a deeper analysis on other projects, feel free to just scan my QR code and to ask me more questions. So for buyers' behavior, if we then look at how people will actually behave in the Lentor cluster, we have to understand one thing. Okay, just now remember my 5120 come from my AIR, which is my active income range. People, 1% of 512,000. So 5,120 people, if I'm looking at this 1%, then we compare the total number of units. That means if my entire cluster, if I look at all of the areas that I've already mapped out just now, and we just take 1% of all these people that potentially want to buy on a year-to-year basis, they will already more than surpass my total number of units in the entire Lentor. And of course, again, I'm considering the fact that not all 4,000 people here will sell. So maybe a small percentage will sell, only maybe 1 or 2%, or even maybe 3% people will sell, which means that honestly, I'm looking at what, maybe up to 120 units per year that sells within this 4,000 unit cluster. Is that reasonable? I think that's more than reasonable. And if I only have 120 units and a potential of 5,000 people that actively wants to upgrade or right size, etc., within the entire huge cluster that I've been looking at, then would you say that here is oversupply? Actually, I wouldn't think so. I would think that it's oversupply as you are buying now, which is a good thing, because when there's so much supply, developers are also scared maybe the pricing is a bit more fair. But next time when the place has matured, you're given it enough time, then you'll be looking at this amount of people wanting to buy, but only maybe 120 units in the market, of which you just have to be very clear of what to buy. It means you have to be very clear on the type of layout you're buying, the price that you're entering. You have to be very clear. And this is usually where we come in, because that's where I can help you to analyze a little bit better. But people then say that, wow, but next time if I want to sell, everybody want to sell how? So we have one thing that has going for us, which is our government intervention, which is our seller stamp duty. But I'll talk about that later. So if you look at total number of units versus total number of potential buyers, I will say that we do have more buyers than sellers, assuming the fact that not everybody's going to sell at the same time. And of course, not all these 5,000 people will even buy Lentor. They may split, buy all over the place, buy landed, the right size, upgrade, etc. We wouldn't know. But generally speaking, the higher this number, the easier it is for you to offload next time. So if you look at Lentor Gardens, it's over here. Compared to it, we have our Lentor Parcel C, which is very expensive, right? Then we have our Hillock Green, we have Lentor Hills, Lentor Mansion, Lentoria, and of course Lentor Modern by itself, which we cut through the Hillock Park, 6 minutes to Lentor MRT station. Number one concern people always tell me here is that, hey, but Lentor Hills, Lentoria are all within 1 km to St. Nick's. The rest is not. Fair question, they are not. So if it is not within 1 km to St. Nick's, and now I can tell you save 300,000, does it still matter to you? This is going to be a very important question because effectively, these 3 condos here will still have the same facilities and amenities. The difference now is that there's a price difference in terms of ownership from each individual condominium here because of what thing? Because of school, which we can later touch on. So if you look at it this way, we talk about land price, which is Lentor Gardens itself, they bid at 920 PSF PPR. Then after that, we have our Lentor Central, which did 1278. In itself is a 38% price difference. Naturally speaking, it is your benefit because why? As long as you enter, next time how much must they sell would definitely be a bit more pricey. And on top of that, if you take a look back at this Lentor Central here and here, the plot is next to each other, about 40% difference. It's a bit no-brainer. Like when we look at it this way, it makes sense that this Lentor Gardens itself is going to do very well because my neighbor is very expensive. So if you look at it this way, Lentor Gardens is here. I mean, we call it last chance. Why? Because if you noticed in my OCR region, Lentor Gardens is $920 per square foot per plot ratio, where even Loyang Valley is 936. Then you have Dairy Farm at 962, Chenchera at 980. What this means is that Chenchera at 980 being Yishun is close to 7% more expensive than Lentor. And Yishun, that particular plot of land, I think 600 to 800 meters from MRT station. So it's actually pretty far away compared to us, which is just a 6 minutes walk. Then if you compare to the other projects, of course, don't really need to say because why? End of the day, the cost is clear cut. If you can enter here and you choose to wait, you will only be paying at a higher price. If not, you'll end up buying resale. But if you want to enter the project that generally can hold value, then this is the project that you should enter into. So next thing we want to look at, this is just Lentor land pricing over the years. We started Lentor Modern 1204 and that's 2021. 5 years later, it's back to the same price at 1278. So next time, any buyers who buy Lentor Central will definitely face a bit of difficulty. But if you look at it this way, you are now buying the cheapest plot of land in Lentor. But if you look at Lentor Hills, you look at Lentoria, you look at Lentor Mansion. Let me just highlight it briefly. Hills, Lentoria, Lentor Mansion. These 3 have school as well as MRT station. School means less than 1 kilometer got St. Nick's, whereas the rest of us don't have. Then again, if let's say you bought Lentor Central, you will hope that it would have been cheaper, but unfortunately, it was about the same price. So now your hope is here, right? Because you can actually buy Lentor Gardens. It's much cheaper. Naturally speaking, opportunity is there. I think this is something that I don't want to dive too much into, but I think it's very clear cut. Okay, especially if they price it well moving forward. Unfortunately, not within 1 km to school, but now I share with you this small diagram once again. Okay, because within 2 kilometers, you got Ang Mo Kio Primary, Mayflower, St. Nick's, as well as Henderson Primary. But if we take a look at it this way, assuming, which is already true, Lentor Modern sold 2005 PSF. No school, but got MRT station. Lentor Hills, I know that some of them sold about 2004 PSF. Got school, got MRT station because it's right next door. So now the question here is, if you can enter here at 2001 PSF, and next time you sell at 2004 PSF, this means that you potentially stand at $300 per square foot gain, correct? If somebody already accepted 2005 PSF here, somebody already accepted 2005 PSF, then your job is very simple. Your job next time is to then sell as best as you can 2005 PSF. This would then help you to gain value. And naturally speaking, all this will affect who? All this will affect Lentor Hills, Lentor Mansion, Lentoria. All this will only affect buyers who have kids that's how old. The buyers who have kids that's less than 7. Then we'll consider to pay the premium for Lentor Hills, Lentor Mansion, and Lentoria. Anybody past 7 years old, they'll say actually it doesn't really matter because why? My kids can walk to Lentor Modern, take the MRT station, or the difference to the schools are not that much different. Why should I need to pay the premium? When it comes to this, what am I trying to showcase here? I'm just trying to showcase consumer behavior. If a consumer is willing to pay, willing to enter at 2001 PSF here, for example, And then eventually, if you sell at 2004 PSF, which is below the selling price of this Lentor Hill or Lentor Mansion, is it good for you? Definitely is. If next time they have to sell at 2007, even better for you, because that is your potential gain. So what I'm looking at here is very clear cut. I want to make sure that the buyers who buy into Lentor Gardens will have room for appreciation. And to do that, you must also believe that Lentor Hills and Lentor Mansion will sell more expensive next time. This is really where I want you to take a look at this. If you can save 300,000 to be in the same estate, the same vicinity, but importantly, you are able to do so because of what? Because of the fact that you have no school within 1 kilometer, I will do it. Because if I have kids more than 7 years old, it really doesn't matter to me whether the project that I buy in is within 1 kilometer or not. I just want to buy a house that is more affordable, at the same time, have the same amenities as everybody else. And this is where you see opportunity as well. Nearby resale, like Panorama, is already 8 years old today, TOP in 2017, already transacted 2002. This is the price of being near a good school, okay, because it's literally right next to CHIJ. So 2002 plus minus kind of PSF is the price range that they're going for. If you're looking at Lentor Modern, it's already accepted 2425 PSF in the sub-sale market. And this is non-GFA harmonized for your information. So if you look at it in general, really coming down to the supply and oversupply question, right? Just take a look at one simple thing here, which is Lentor Gardens and Lentor Central will be affected by the 4 years SSD. The rest will not be. The rest is still going through 3 years SSD. So if you take a look at all the individual highlights over here, you'll realize that SSD is 2027, 26, 27, 26, 25, and then 28. Then you have to wait from 2028 plus 2 to 3 years. Then you can sell Lentor Gardens and Lentor Central. This is a room for maturity, which means that as all these units will eventually still sell, yes, they will have their supply problem. That means they'll be fighting against one another and whatnot. Once the market has calmed down, that means it becomes a state that everybody is not pushing for sale anymore. The investors have already left and the own stayers are already there. Then you realize that Lentor Gardens and eventually Lentor Central come onto the resale market. Then you will start seeing the maturity of the other condominiums here will be the reason why you can then gain a lot stronger PSF in the market. So we then have to understand this being the only project in this vicinity that's bidded by Kingsford. Kingsford also has a tendency to do price increment because now they know that Lentor Central's land is much more expensive. Let's say Lentor's highest transaction is 2006. We will say that the best buy is always in the initial phase, even if the project is undersubscribed. So if I was you, I would try my best to enter into Lentor ASAP because this is a very good opportunity for us to enter into. One example we always use for Kingsford is the Tron Park example. So if you take a look at Tron Park, let's say in November 2024 when they launched a level 18 unit at 2,600 PSF. Now you're looking at a level 12 unit in February of 2026 at 2,697 PSF. Lower floor, more expensive. Then you see what's available. The same stack, level 5 in stack 15 now is asking 2,653 PSF at 3.25 million, which is at $2,000 cheaper than my level 18 unit. So this means what? This means that anybody who buy in the later phase 3, you will expect to pay a premium compared to if you buy early. So if I was you, I wouldn't hesitate too much and I'll just try to move in early. Coming to the end of my slides here, which is basically just a look at the land PSF and the average transacted prices here. I won't hold too much emphasis here because we don't know how much Lentor Gardens wants to sell, but I tell you, if they can launch anywhere between a 1,900 to a 2,200 PSF, I think it's more than safe for you to enter because the range of prices done by all my other projects down the line has already been surpassed by 20-30% base of 2002 mark up to a 2006 mark. So I think that this is definitely a price point that you can enter if you're looking for a project that can probably gain you some capital appreciation in time to come. Just to summarize everything that I've talked about based on my future buyer affordability, my availability of supply and demand, and also my buyer's behavior or consumer behavior in the area, is Lentor Garden a FAB approved project or whether it is a flawed project? In my humble opinion, it is definitely an FAB approved project because of these 3 factors that I have spoken about, and you try to link it up to all my different macro factors. These few factors alone will make the project definitely an easy to sell when times to come. However, you then have to look at one last set of information which I did not put into here because I think it's a bit dry already. It's all the layout comparisons, the unit, the facing, all these kind of things which also will impact your ability to buy and sell next time, and also to understand developers' pricing strategy, which I definitely have an upper hand in. If you understand how FAB works and you know that FAB is a very good concept for you to follow, reach out to me. Moving forward, I can share with you more floor plan analysis and more information about the project, as well as everything that you need to know to make a very value buy or very educated purchase. So once again, my name is Jacob. Thanks for watching my video. If you feel that you're still unclear about any of the things that I shared today, feel free to reach out to me via my WhatsApp, scan this QR code, and also you can watch my other video here in relation to the FAB concept and how I use this concept to actually determine whether a property in Singapore is worth to buy or not worth to buy. Okay, so thank you very much once again. Do help me to like, share, subscribe the video. Thank you very much. I see you guys again soon. Bye bye.